One of the questions men often search for online is, why do I suddenly need the toilet all the time? What makes this confusing is that many people do exactly the right thing. They visit their GP, they have tests done, the bladder is checked, the prostate is checked, and everything comes back normal. Yet the urgency continues. So if the bladder itself is healthy, what is actually happening? And very often the answer lies in the communication system between the bladder and the brain. The bladder isn't simply a storage tank that fills and empties. It's part of a signalling system with the brain. As the bladder gradually fills, nerves in the bladder wall send signals through the spinal cord to the brain. The brain then interprets those signals and decides whether it's time to empty the bladder or whether it's fine to wait. When the nervous system is calm, this process happens quietly in the background. You just might notice a gentle awareness that the bladder is filling, but there is usually plenty of time before anything becomes urgent. But the important word here is interpretation, because the same signal from the bladder can feel very different depending on the state of the nervous system. If the nervous system becomes more vigilant, perhaps during a stressful period, illness, travel anxiety, or after an uncomfortable experience, the brain may begin paying much closer attention to bladder sensations, and attention amplifies sensation. A signal that once felt mild can suddenly begin to feel urgent. One way to think about this is like a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm is designed to detect danger and warn you quickly. But sometimes alarms become overly sensitive. Steam from the shower or burnt toast can trigger the same alarm that should be reserved for a real fire. The bladder signalling system can behave in a very similar way. The system itself isn't faulty, it has simply become oversensitive. In many cases there is a moment, sometimes obvious only in hindsight, when the pattern first began. A delayed journey, a long queue, a moment when reaching a toilet felt uncertain. The experience passes, but the brain remembers it. And on the next journey, the nervous system becomes more alert. The brain begins monitoring bladder sensations more closely, and the urgency can appear earlier and earlier. And over time, the brain learns to associate certain situations with urgency. Travel, meetings, long car journeys, anywhere toilets might not be immediately available. This is also why medical tests often show nothing unusual. The bladder muscle may be functioning perfectly normally. There may be no infection, no structural problem. The sensations are real, but they're being amplified by a nervous system that's become overly vigilant. But the encouraging news is that the nervous system is highly adaptable. Just as it can learn to become oversensitive to certain signals, it can also learn to settle again. And the process isn't about forcing the bladder to hold longer or trying to ignore the urge. Those approaches actually often increase anxiety and actually make the pattern stronger. And instead, the aim is to help the nervous system return to a calmer state where the brain interprets bladder signals more accurately. And when that happens, urgency often begins to soften. People find they can travel again without constantly thinking about toilets. The monitoring of the bladder gradually fades into the background. And in my work as a clinical hypnotherapist, I help clients calm the nervous system response that drives these patterns. And hypnotherapy is simply a structured way of helping the mind enter a deeply relaxed state where the brain can update unhelpful response patterns. Alongside hypnosis, we also work with practical strategies that help build confidence in situations that become triggering. So if bladder urgency is affecting your daily life, particularly if medical tests have ruled out infection or prostate problems, it may be worth exploring whether the signalling pattern between the brain and the bladder has become overactive. And if you'd like to read a full explanation of this topic, I've written a detailed article which I'll link in the description below. Understanding how the bladder and brain communicate is often the first step toward helping the system settle again. Final question for you. Many people notice bladder urgency appears in specific situations like travel or meetings. I'm interested to know, Is there a particular situation where you notice it most?